Welcome to Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell. This is the place where we dive into the world of talent acquisition, explore the challenges of today's workplace, and discover what it takes to build a thriving and successful organization.
My guest today is Zeynep Ton, a renowned MIT professor and a leading voice on good jobs. We're discussing her latest book, The Case for Good Jobs, a leadership guide for choosing excellence and providing good jobs that offer a living wage, dignity, and opportunities for growth. Ton's groundbreaking research shows that the key to success lies in combining good jobs with strong operations. We're going to delve into the practical, prescriptive, and often provocative ideas and learn why The Case for Good Jobs is an essential read for leaders of any company that wants to make a difference and choose excellence. Zeynep, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
So great to have you here. So let me just dive right in a little bit here. What inspired you to focus your research on the intersection of operation employees and profitability?
Great. So in late 1990s, when I was a doctoral student, I joined a group of researchers who had a project called rocket science retailing. And the objective was, to use data and smart algorithms to help retailers maximize profits by getting them, the right product at the right time, at the right store with the right price. And in our world of operations management, when we think about managing product availability, it's all about planning and analysis. You forecast demand, you optimize inventory levels. But what I found early in my research was that managing product availability had so much to do with managing people and designing their work. So oftentimes, in a retail store, a product was at the store, but store employees didn't have time to shelve it or they put it in the wrong place. So the customers ended up experiencing a stock out for a product that was physically in the store. The supply chain got it there. The data that was used in merchandise planning systems were oftentimes inaccurate because people made mistakes. So, and these problems were incredibly expensive. They led to lost sales, they led to poor merchandising decisions, they led to high inventory costs and lower productivity. In every company that I work with, and that I work with, John, I find that stores that have more employee turnover have more of these problems. Stores that are understaffed have more of these problems. And so that's how, operations, people, performance all came together for me. And when you look at the world, oftentimes in academia, and I think in practice too, we love dividing the world into different parts, right? Operations, marketing, HR, logistics.
Fit it into nice tight boxes.
Yes. And so many companies operate in silos and make decisions in silos. But the truth is, solving important problems requires a system view.
That's great. And as I was talking with one of my colleagues who heads a very large assembly company in the electronics industry, one of his comments was, anybody can buy these machines, anybody can buy the parts. It's the people and how you train and utilize the people that really makes the difference. So I'm glad you said that. We're going to dive deep into it, but can you give us kind of a 30,000 foot overview of what good job strategy is?
So early in my research, I mentioned these operational problems that were driven by employee turnover and labor practices. I saw that so many of the retailers that I studied were stuck in a vicious cycle of low pay, high turnover, and poor performance. But then I studied a group of companies that included Costco, now one of the world's largest retailers, Trader Joe's, a supermarket chain that's very well known, Quick Trip, a convenience store chain with gas stations that operated very differently. When I looked at these companies, their employee turnover levels were a fraction of their industry average. Quick Trip's was less than a third of their industry average. Costco's turnover was 6% for people who have been there for a year. And they paid their employees almost double the industry average. And these companies, so they offered good jobs from an employee standpoint. And for their customers, they were constantly improving the value and service offered to them. And just to highlight, these are companies that are offering the same low prices, and they're incredibly successful financially. So I asked, what's their secret? Right? What do they
Yeah.
do differently? And what I found was that it wasn't just heavy investment in people, although heavy investment in people was incredibly important. But the magic for them was creating an operational model that helped their employees be a lot more productive and serve their customers a lot better by the design of their work, by the design of their system. And we can get into, however much detail that you want to get into in terms of that operational model. I get quite excited about it, but I'll stop there.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, you really surprised me when you said that they were paying their employees nearly double, because one of the challenges that I've found, in the electronics industry is of course this challenge of compensation, because everybody wants their electronics dirt cheap, right? Nobody wants to pay $1,000 for a clock radio, but there's these pressures as you move down the supply chain to have tighter and tighter margins, and usually that gets at least one of the aspects. One of the largest costs that we see in most companies is your staffing, your personnel, and so that tends to be where people try to squeeze a little bit. But so I'm interested to hear more about that.
Along with that, I remember reading the biography of the founder of Trader Joe's, and he said, people costs are, of course, a big part of costs, but
Hmm.
material costs, inventory costs are so much higher. And he said, but the thing is, we try to squeeze as much as possible from the people costs, whereas if we use our people well, if they stayed with us, we could get a lot more productivity, a lot more benefits from a material cost perspective.
Yeah, so it's measure instead of squeezing on the bottom half of the equation, the expenses. Why don't we do a better job of selling the things? If we take care of the people, if they can, move more product, then the top line grows and the bottom line takes care of itself.
Yeah, exactly. And when we work with companies, John, the question about, how do you make the case, how can you pay people more? How can you, first of all, it's
Yeah,
not just paying people more. We can
right.
get back to the good job strategy. But when we work with companies and we get into their system and their status quo, what they realize is that they're already spending the money. If they don't pay employees well, if they operate with high employee turnover, they're already spending that money from all the lost sales, all the mistakes, all the product costs, all the direct employee turnover costs, and
Yep.
cost of low productivity. So
And
it's about
retraining new employees. Yeah, so it's starting
exactly.
all over again.
Exactly. So you just redirect the money from there to people, investing in people who, by the way, appreciate in value over time. And even more important for them. And this is the case in manufacturing too. I grew up studying the Toyota production system,
Hmm.
but even more important are the competitive costs. Winning with your customers. When companies design a system based on low pay and high turnover, that system ends up becoming really vulnerable. There are
Yeah.
so many things that companies can't do. They can't hire the right people. They can't train them well because managers are constantly fighting fires and they just want to get as many people as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
They can't empower their people. They can't keep high expectations. They can't keep good store managers. So it's a system that's very vulnerable. And if you want to win with your customers and if you want to compete and adapt to changes, that system is not a good system for that game.
Excellent. I want to dive into the actual system of the good job strategy, but before I do, let me ask a couple of little high level questions as well, just to make sure I'm understanding. So you mentioned Trader Joe's, Costco, Quick Trip. Do you have confidence that the good job strategy can be modeled across all different types, whether it's retail or service industries or manufacturing organizations? Do you feel confident, or is one particular segment better suited to the good job strategy?
If you asked me this question 8 years ago, I would have said I only studied this sector. So I can't. I'm an academic. But
Yep.
since my first book, The Good Job Strategy, came out in 2014, I had requests from leaders of all industries, of companies of all sizes, from financial services to call centers to hospitals to senior living organizations to manufacturing to house painting businesses. And they all came to describe me their own vicious cycle that they were operating in. And they all realized the cost of their status quo and they want to have a way out. And as I began working with some of these companies, and I started a nonprofit called the Good Jobs Institute to help these companies, what I realized with my colleagues is that the system that I described in my first book, The Good Job Strategy, with the heavy investment in people and the operational model, applies to industries that I hadn't studied before.
This ties into what I wrote about in my book, Fire Your Hiring Habits, because I'm keenly interested in employee satisfaction, employee loyalty. The data shows that when you put the investment in the people, they tend to be more loyal and you have low turnover. Does that factor into the good job strategy?
Absolutely. And one of when you look at the mental models of leaders who began and who either started their organizations with the good job strategy or who changed, and we can talk about these change examples too, in their mental model, they invest in people and they do what it takes to attract the right people and retain the right people, because they realize that retaining people, keeping turnover as low as possible is extremely important for their business. And for manufacturing in particular, those of your listeners who might have studied Toyota production system,
Mhm.
everybody talks about lean, but lean or Toyota production system doesn't work without people stability. Employee low turnover is a prerequisite for
Yep.
implementing that type of operational excellence in manufacturing. So, absolutely, investing in people plays a huge role in the good job strategy.
All right. So as we explore the strategy, you're talking about resources and operational models that work together to help us better understand it. Can you share a specific example of a company that has successfully implemented the good job strategy? What did they do? How did the framework get applied into their situation?
Yes, absolutely. And the strategy is, partly investment in people, partly an operational model with four components, and those are focus and simplify, standardize and empower, cross train and operate with Slack. And I will get to that. So in the book, I provide examples from a wide range of industries, but I'll focus on one for this particular question because it's the company that went through the most changes and the biggest changes, and it's Sam's Club.
Okay.
Sam's Club is Walmart's warehouse club, and I recommend an interview that Tim Simmons, a very competent leader from Sam's Club, did with Harvard Business Review in the May-June issue. But in 2017, when John Furner became the CEO of Sam's Club, the club was really struggling. Their same-store sales growth had been low. It was behind their biggest competitor, Costco. Their service wasn't good. Product availability wasn't great, and it really mattered that their product availability wasn't great because their net promoter score dropped 30 points when customers couldn't find a product. Fundamentals really matter in most businesses, and their employee turnover was high. So that status quo for them was okay for a long time, but given the growth in e-commerce and the tough competition, it wasn't okay. So to win with their customers, the first thing, and this is the most important part perhaps of the good job strategy, the first thing was for them to define how are they going to win with their customers. Why is it that we exist in the eyes of our customers? What do we want to be the best at? This is where I do focus and simplify. They decided that to win with their customers in this new world, they had to offer great merchandise at low prices. People pay to go to Sam's Club to be able to get low
Sure.
prices. And they want to create a frictional omni experience, right? So now, once you identify how you're going to win with your customers, then you think about, okay, how do I simplify? How do I simplify so that I can position my employees to be productive so that I can pay them more, so that they can be experts on what they do. So once they clarified their value proposition, they said, okay, we're going to start simplifying. And they simplified in so many different ways. For example, they reduced their product variety by about 25%. And when most people hear about, oh my God, you reduce your product variety, your customers are going to complain. But their customers started rating them higher on merchandising, because now they could actually find the products. And in addition to reducing product variety, they reduce price changes, promotions. Those add so much variability in supply chains, make their employees' jobs so much harder. And this simplification enabled Sam's Club to be able to pay their employees substantially more. And it also enabled them to create more stable schedules. So focus and simplify is the first pillar, first of the four operational choices of the good job strategy. The other is a combination of standardization and empowerment. So Sam's Club started standardizing a lot of practices, but also empowered their frontline employees. And one of the best examples of empowerment was when it came to technology adoption. So they started using so many new technologies to be able to simplify the work, to make it more productive, to standardize it, but they constantly asked employees for their feedback. They had a button in every single technology app that they rolled out, and it had, what is working, what's not working, give us some feedback. So that type of empowerment, of course, makes employees happier, but it also enables employees to add more value. So now you can pay them more. So the second portion of the good job strategy is and standardize and empower. And empowerment takes on so many different forms, right? It's from making decisions for your customers to improving technologies as Sam's Club did. And it's even, managing the checkout so that you can adapt to changes in traffic. You go fast when there are so many customers. Maybe you take more time to chat with them and there are fewer customers. That's the empowerment. The third part of the good job strategy is cross train. And for Sam's Club, cross training was they divided the stores into big groups. And in those groups, in those areas, people were cross trained to do a variety of tasks. And what does it mean when your employees are cross trained? Now that means that when the customers are there, they can take care of the customers. When the customers are not there, they can do other tasks. They could shelve merchandise, they could check inventory, they could do cleaning. So that enables them to serve the customer so much better, and that also enables them to be productive all the time. And the fourth part of the good job strategy, which is my favorite operational choice actually, is that you staff your environment with enough people. I call this operate with slack. You staff your environment with enough people, more than the average workload, so that people can do their job without making mistakes, so that people can engage in continuous improvement, so that they can serve the customer better. And the best way to operate with slack is to reduce the workload, all that unnecessary workload, as much as possible. One of the ways that Sam's Club did this was early on, they realized that their club managers were just overwhelmed with so much that was coming from corporate headquarters. And any listener that works in a large organization in the front lines will know, sales gives you something, HR gives you another thing, logistics give you, you're always overwhelmed with the number of requests. So what they did was they created an air traffic control center. And they said, from now on, all the headquarter requests have to go through this air traffic control center. And we are going to smooth the workload so that all the things don't hit the stores at the same time. And we're going to prioritize. So this was a way for them to reduce the workload and give their employees enough time and store managers enough time to do their job. And I forgot to mention perhaps the most important change, which was they had a huge investment in their people. I mean, in 2019, the pay levels for thousands of people were increased $5 to $7 an hour from a basis of $15 an hour. Think about
Wow.
this.
Wow.
Think about if you're a meat cutter,
30 to
you used to
50%.
make
That's impressive.
that's a huge investment in pay. And they provided stable schedules along with investment in pay and increased the percentage of full timers. And this changed people's lives. And the outcome of that, of course, was a huge reduction in employee turnover. Frontline turnover for all of their employees dropped by 25%. Store manager turnover dropped by even more. Internal promotion rates increased, and they started winning with their customers. I mean, if you look at Sam's Club, their comparable store sales, which is a very important metric in retail, grew by double digits 12 quarters in a row. Their net promoter scores increased, and they have been able to do things that they were not able to do before. So that's a huge, and I see this in a wide range of companies that adopt the good job strategy: higher customer satisfaction and sales, lower turnover, and improved productivity.
So I like as you talk about this fourth pillar, staffing with enough people. It also sounds like as you're doing that, so that they can easily do it, you tie back to your focus and simplicity as well, because you're trying to simplify the things that they have to deal with. So there's some feedback loops in your system as well.
Exactly. And these four choices are, I'm so glad, John, you brought this out, because these four choices, the focus and simplify, standardize and empower, cross-train, operate with Slack, they're all connected to one another. It's a system that works really nicely together. Empowering your employees is a lot easier if you have simplified, so that people are knowledgeable about the products and services that you're offering your customers. Empowering is also much easier if you have invested in your people, so that your turnover is low, so people are experienced, they know what they're doing.
Absolutely. All right, Zeynep, we have more to get to, but we have to stop here. Coming up in the second part of my conversation with Zeynep Ton, an MIT professor and author of The Case for Good Jobs, Zeynep talks about the steps leaders can take to build a culture filled with good jobs.
Subtract all that unnecessary work, simplify as much as possible early on, and to invest in frontline employees as much as possible, so you can reduce turnover, so you can get out of the vicious cycle that you're operating in, so that managers have time to do what they're supposed to do.
This has been Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you want to empower your organization to reach new heights, go to johnwmitchell.com to find the techniques and tools you need to attract and retain the best team and boldly reimagine your workplace. Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell is a production of Forbes Books.